What is up, Bitcoiners? This is CK, and this is another Bitcoin Magazine podcast. For this episode, I sit down with Dergigi, the prolific Bitcoin thinker and the senior software engineer over at Swan Bitcoin. Make sure to check out Dergigi at Dergigi on Twitter. Make sure to check out Swan Bitcoin and all the amazing Bitcoin content and easy DCAing you can do over there. Before we get into this episode, though, I want to talk about our sponsor. This is BitcoinBlackFriday.com. At BitcoinBlackFriday.com, you can go and you can find tons and tons of deals, hundreds of deals for Bitcoin. You can get close to 50% off and really, really steep discounts on some of your favorite hardware wallets, amongst other amazing merchandise that is available on BitcoinBlackFriday.com. There's only 2 more weeks to take advantage of all the amazing deals there, and there's only 2 more weeks to take advantage of the Fold Sats back card 1 Bitcoin giveaway. If you go to BitcoinBlackFriday.com, over in the header, you can click onto that and you can get onto the wait list for the Fold Sats back debit card. And if you get onto the wait list through the Bitcoin Black Friday link, you are entered into a competition to win 1 whole Bitcoin. We're going to have a drawing on Black Friday, and the winner is going to get an entire Bitcoin. That is a life-changing amount of sats. Today, that's $16,000. When we started this competition, it was $10,000. So 1 BTC, who knows how big of a giveaway this is going to be when it all comes to an end. But you guys, BitcoinBlackFriday.com, the 1 BTC giveaway from Fold, and all the other amazing deals on there. Don't miss it. And without further ado, let's just get right into this podcast with Dergigi. This week, I am sitting down with just one of the most fascinating and deep thinkers in the Bitcoin space, my good friend Gigi at Dergigi on Twitter. Gigi, welcome to the show.
Hey, CK. Thanks for having me.
So Gigi is the senior engineer or a senior engineer at the much-loved Swan Bitcoin, but is also just an absolutely prolific content creator. Before we got on this call, he said, when I asked him what does he do or what should I say he does, he said, I just write words and code for Bitcoin. So he is here as part of, Bitcoin's meme army and one of the most powerful soldiers as far as I'm concerned. So really excited to get into a recent thread that he put out on his Twitter. I guess it wasn't that recent. It was kind of a while ago, but it's one of my favorite threads and on one of the topics that I am most interested in, which is Bitcoin's circular nature. So I guess without further ado, Gigi, do you want to just kind of jump into introducing the concept of Bitcoin's circularity from, what we've discussed and what you've kind of come up with?
Yeah, of course. You were actually like a big part of this insight since we met in person in Riga, and we hit it off quite well and had some long and deep discussions. And of course, we got a little bit drunk and got a little bit cosmic and stuff like that. And so
just a little bit.
Yeah. So I don't know how it happened, but I had this kind of, to me at least, profound insight that Bitcoin is inherently circular and that it has this circular nature. And if you study Bitcoin, it's kind of obvious, but it kind of hit me in a weird way how deeply true this is. And I think there's so many great memes in the Bitcoin space, and most of them are way more profoundly true than most people and even most Bitcoiners, I think, realize. And the 2 I like most is Bitcoin is different things to different people. And the second one is pretty much like 1 BTC equals 1 BTC. And it all relates to this circular idea. I think, Bitcoin is so many different things depending on how you look at it. And I think it all kind of loops back to the fact that it's a very powerful idea and a very powerful meme, and it's this mind virus that spreads pretty much. So that was part of the insight, that it's kind of unstoppable in the sense that it is a sound idea. It's not only sound money, but it is like something that works from first principles. And you can see that as well, that many Bitcoiners that studied it for years intensely and tried to break it, to break this idea, they all arrived at the same Schelling point, that they cannot break this idea. And so all of that was part of this insight. And I think, we can dive deeper into certain aspects of this circular nature if you want to.
Yeah, so I think one of the most fundamental and basic aspects of Bitcoin circularity is kind of this mechanism of price, hash rate increases, adoption increases, and then repeat, right? So like everything is kind of circularly connected to price and awareness of Bitcoin. Can you talk about the relationship between price, security, and adoption, and how that is used in the Bitcoin system, or how that works?
Yeah, as Michael Saylor, like one of the latest very bullish additions to the Bitcoiner army, so to speak, he mentioned a couple of times in his interviews that he views Bitcoin as a system that doesn't leak, like it's a closed system, it's a closed loop, so to speak. And he compares it a lot to thermodynamics, and it's like a battery that doesn't leak. Like the idea that money is a battery isn't new. Like it's an economic battery. And so with a closed system, you have the problem of like bootstrapping. If nothing comes out of it again, you need a way to bootstrap yourself, and Bitcoin does this beautifully in this loopy, circular, self-referential nature. So I think the most important step by far in Bitcoin's life as of now, like from the first block to now, I think the most important step was from 0 to 1, from like no value at all to some value, that someone, for whatever reason, put some value on a Bitcoin. And ever since we're in this eternal feedback loop, and it seems like, and it's a meme, but once you understand it deeply enough, you realize how profoundly true it is. Bitcoin there's only one thing that can happen to the price, and it can only go up. And as you mentioned, you have this price, security, adoption, feedback cycle, and it's all interrelated. But in terms of price, you basically have, like, once the number goes up, then mining becomes more profitable. That means more people are going to mine. So number of miners goes up as well, which in turn means the security goes up, and which in turn means that the trust and the usage of the network goes up. And this in turn makes number go up as well, because the whole network is more valuable and the asset becomes more valuable. And this is also true for security. So again, like all of this is interrelated, but once the price rises, again, mining becomes more profitable and more processing power goes into mining. So the cryptographic walls become stronger and thicker. And again, the network becomes more secure, and the demand for store of value goes up. So again, it's the same kind of feedback loop. So price and security are very interrelated, and so is adoption as well. And we see again these loops, these adoption cycles, and we're at the beginning of the next hype cycle, like we're at the beginning of the next bull run. I think it's kind of obvious. all systems are go, and the rocket is lighting up. And so again, if the number goes up, then like media hype is going to be generated. New waves of people are going to come in, and some of those people will study Bitcoin enough and will get it and will become Bitcoiners and will see behind the speculation and see behind like making more US dollars with Bitcoin, but they will flip their unit of account and will try to get as many sets as possible. And this in turn means more education, more educational material, more development, more hodlers are going to be born in the next cycle. And again, the mind virus spreads again, like more memes are going to be created, more art is going to be created, and all of that helps to spread the Bitcoin mind virus. And with the next cycle, number will go up again. Absolutely.
And I think that you have to be in Bitcoin for an entire cycle, from a deep bear market all the way through a bull market, to fully understand what you just said, which is that every single time this cycle flows through, new people are recruited, and those new people are actually better at spreading Bitcoin than the old people. You know, you love the OGs, you try to learn as much from the people with that experience, but then you look at someone like Michael Saylor, who has a much larger following, has much more clout, has much more skin in the game just immediately, and seemingly has the ability to, spread the Bitcoin message in new and profound ways that, us Bitcoiners that have been, shit posting on Twitter for 4 years, maybe we're moving in that direction and we helped him get there, but he's just added so much. And guess what? There are much bigger fish than Michael Saylor that have yet to fully enter the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think all of it compounds, like thinking through the different aspects of Bitcoin takes a lot of time. And if you can just read a piece by Parker Lewis or Robert Breedlove and don't have to do the hundreds or even thousands of hours of thinking yourself, it's like a cheat code, and Michael Saylor admitted that as well. Like once someone figured it out and can present it in a succinct and understandable way, it's very easy to kind of get it as well. Like once he also compared it to some other like breakthroughs in understanding. Once you understand how gravity works, for example, then you kind of like some engineering concepts, then you kind of can easily apply it and understand it, and you don't need to come to the same conclusion yourself. So you save yourself a lot of time. And I think this will continue to be true. And we see it already with Michael Saylor. He has various different pitches for Bitcoin down because he's a very successful businessman and investor, and he knows how to pitch Bitcoin to investors, and he knows how to pitch Bitcoin to like technologists, and he knows how he should talk to other Bitcoiners about Bitcoin. And I think like he's insanely deep down the rabbit hole, and he gets the more esoteric concepts in Bitcoin as well. And yeah, it's
and not
really
to interrupt you. And not to interrupt you, but guys like him, guys like Preston Pish, guys that have, clout and deep understanding in the areas that we want to take Bitcoin, seeing them not only, become fascinated with Bitcoin, but also become part of the Bitcoin community is just, it's so incredibly bullish.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's one thing to find other people on the internet agree with you, so you're not insanely completely crazy. But it's another thing if like CEOs of multi-million or even billion-dollar companies come in and pretty much repeat what you've been saying for the last couple of years, and you were always the crazy person, and now the group of crazy persons just some very high profile people joined, and this is very, very good to see. So it seems that the Bitcoiners are onto something.
Okay, so I think we digressed a little bit from the circular nature, but I think we've done a really good job of really highlighting the compound snowballing effect that Bitcoin has, and as a closed loop system that doesn't leak value, that doesn't leak mind share, we've seen it really dominate.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like I think this is only one aspect of the circular nature of Bitcoin. And there are even like subcomponents in Bitcoin. As you know, I really love the comparison of Bitcoin as a new form of life, and life is also circular. Like nature itself is circular, and some people compared Bitcoin to nature and the natural process, and that's how I see it as well. I see it as a like cybernetic organism and who lives in symbiosis with human. So like Bitcoin pays us to keep it alive, and Bitcoin also evolves. Like for example, the whole Bitcoin software is kind of circular in nature as well, if you think about it in the right way. Like for example, as soon as a new version gets released, like the whole improvement process. For example, there are new bits proposed, like the improvements are proposed, they're discussed, and eventually like a pull request is opened, eventually it gets added to the code, the pull request gets merged, and a new version is released, and it all begins anew. It's not unlike biological systems, how they upgrade. Of course, it's it's not as random, and like it's a more directed evolution, so to speak. And also, like, to pick another circular sub-process in Bitcoin, mining itself is completely circular. Like finding a new block is just an insanely circular process, because it's always the same race. And then once someone won the competition, it starts anew. Like you bundle transactions in the block, you verify the transactions, you add the hash of the previous block header, you solve the proof of work puzzle by iterating through the nonces, and then you add it to the chain once you found a solution, and you propagate your solution, and then it starts all over again. You again bundle transactions from the mempool into a block. And so all of that is just fascinating to me, that so many aspects of Bitcoin are circular. And I think also understanding Bitcoin, it's kind of to me at least, it was kind of a circular journey. That's also why I said, like, I think the rabbit hole is circular. So when you first hear about Bitcoin, it's just this like crazy idea, or at least it was for me, like, and you think, this idea can never work. And also how Bitcoin got started and got developed. It went from idea to code to technology. It eventually became like a financial thing, eventually became like a social movement, eventually like a cult formed around it. I think we're at the cult stage now, pretty much, like, and have been for a while. And it all goes back to how Bitcoin is this very powerful idea. And I think the cult rallies around the idea in the end, and so it loops back to being an idea again. And all of this kind of, hit me over a year ago. And ever since I can't stop thinking about those kind of things. And I still have some writing to do to flesh this out.
So speaking about the Bitcoin cult, I think cult is a very decisive word. I think it's a word that really turns off a lot of people, but it's also a word that Bitcoiners seem to have a lot of pride in and rally around. Can you talk about like what you define as a cult, and why is cult-like behavior in Bitcoin something that's very healthy for the system?
Yeah, again, like coming back to the biology metaphor, I think the cultish Bitcoiners, like the toxic maximalists, they act as the white blood cells of the organism. So in the end, there is a social component to all of it, and you kind of have to you have to protect this idea, and there are people that will protect this idea at all costs. And I think Michael Saylor talked about that a lot as well. It was one of his main decisions why he decided to invest almost $500 million into Bitcoin. It's because the block size debate and the social conflict around it, like the civil war around the block size increase, it was resolved in the end. And there were people that, in his words, like they're willing to defend the network to the death, and that's definitely like a very serious commitment to this idea and to this monetary network and to this revolution. And I think in Bitcoin the main idea is around the unchanging system, like the unchanging monetary policy, because without that you will never disentangle money from the state or money from human involvement. And so you need something that is unchanging and that's doing its own thing. And once you try to meddle with this idea, and once you try to introduce change, you destroy the whole essence of the system. And I think this was the main fight in the block size debate. Like to me, it wasn't really about scaling. Like scaling is a side issue. To me, it was changing the system in any way, shape, or form. And that doesn't mean that Bitcoin doesn't get upgrades and doesn't evolve and doesn't get better. It's just whatever the soul of Bitcoin is, whatever the essence is, and you can define that technically as well. Like once you hard fork away, you didn't stick to the essence of Bitcoin. So that's how I see it. And that also doesn't mean, like, I always have to preface this. there's of course nuance, like if the only way that the organism survives is going to be a hard fork, then obviously people will have to hard fork. Like if it is hard fork or death, then I will choose hard fork. But if it's for other stupid reasons, like, not a chance. And I think it's interesting to hear Michael Saylor talk about that this was the deciding factor for him, that we survived that, and there are people, as he said, like willing to die for this and willing to defend the network at all costs. And I think that's where the cultish behavior comes in. Like once you align yourself with a cause very deeply, I think it's it's very natural to be cultish and religious about it. And you see that, I think it's just human nature. You see that all the time. You see it in politics. You see it with other movements. And you see it in Bitcoin as well.
I don't know. I have a lot of strong thoughts, and I totally agree. I even, there's this other meme in Bitcoin. It kind of goes along with the cult, but it's the Bitcoin taco clubs. And many Bitcoin taco plebs are incredibly, incredibly intelligent people and well, thought out people. Calling them plebs kind of feels weird, but a lot of plebs are just normal people. And I feel like, the beautiful thing about Bitcoin is that its ideas have become so understandable that just everyday normal people are starting to pick up on them. And then they're starting to hang out with other plebs, and then those plebs are lifting them up. And there's like this social circularity and improvement cycle that happens, within everyone that touches Bitcoin. And I'm just kind of curious, like, have you been observing this process, and, what's your commentary on this phenomenon?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most interesting phenomena currently in the Bitcoin space. Like it obviously changes you, and it's very hard for me to untangle why that is. It obviously lowers your time preference, for example, and Saifedean talks about that a lot. I think the best person to talk about that is John Wallis. He's very interested in the personal and individual change that Bitcoin seems to, it seems to channel it or enable it at least. I think it also has to do that it enables some kind of financial freedom. So it is one way to leave the rat race and to just exit that slavery to some degree. Like if you truly stick around for long enough and you just stack sats during one full cycle, you're probably in a way better financial position than you've been before. And also you obviously learn about money, you learn about financial systems, you learn about financial constructs, you learn about all the ways you might keep or even increase your purchasing power. You kind of, you learn a lot of things just in general, and how money and the world works, and that puts you in a better position automatically. I think it's not only the lowering of time preference, it's also the taking on of complete responsibility. Like if you do it the Bitcoin way, the only thing that is truly acceptable is self-custody and running your own node and just taking everything in your own hands. And I think this also has rippling effects throughout your whole life. Like once you manage to be self-sovereign when it comes to your finances, you will probably be self-sovereign in other areas of your life as well. So I think those two are probably the main drivers. But I think there is even a deeper, more esoteric and spiritual reason for it. I think at least Bitcoin to me is something akin to absolute truth, like capital T truth. And if you think about it technically, Nakamoto consensus is truth per definition. Like whoever has the heaviest chain has the capital T truth. And even if it changes and we have like a chain split and like history changes, so to speak, there is never a debate what is true and what is not, so to speak. And I think viewing it from that perspective, Bitcoin can also be seen as this immovable object, so to speak. And I think interacting with such a mighty immovable object changes you in a way as well. And I also think, I really like one of the latest pieces by Nick Carter, Bitcoin at 12. He published it on the day the white paper came out. And he compared it to a cathedral being built. Like you work on something that is bigger than yourself, and you work on a common vision, and you're fine with the fact that you might not be alive to see the cathedral. You're just working on a grand project is enough, so to speak. And I think Bitcoin is truly bigger than every one of us. Like I've said it many times before, I think the heartbeat of the Bitcoin network will outlive all of ours. And I think it's true. Like it's there. Once you understand Bitcoin, there's no way that's not true. Like it will definitely outlive me and it will outlive everyone else, just like electricity does, like electricity outlives all of us. And I see Bitcoin on the same level than electricity and the internet and like all those things that we take for granted now. I think in time it will be clear that it will be like one of those things that we just invented and it won't go away. And I think all of this combined, it obviously changes you. And I think for most people, at least for most Bitcoiners that I interacted with, it definitely changes you to the better.
So I want you to explain why Bitcoin is going to be around longer than us. And I want you to explain it to someone who might not believe that. And I think that this could be useful for someone who's listening to this podcast and doesn't believe that, but it could also be useful for a Bitcoiner who's listening to this podcast and frequently will have to explain that to people in their lives.
So it's really hard to explain without getting technical. And I don't want to get technical on this podcast. I think there are enough resources out there to really dig deep into that. But unkillability and decentralization are the same thing. Like if you think about life as being decentralized, like ants, for example, ants are extremely decentralized. You maybe you can stamp out one ant colony, but you can't stamp out all the ants on Earth. And the Bitcoin network is set up like, that there are some quote unquote centralized anthills, maybe, and maybe you can like drop a nuke and then those anthills are gone. But you will never be able to stamp out all the ants on the Earth. You would have to do it simultaneously. You would have to do a coordinated attack on every ant on the planet. And that's how Bitcoin is set up. That's how Bitcoin behaves. That's why Bitcoin is unkillable. And the whole idea of Bitcoin, like the whole reason why Satoshi invented Bitcoin in the first place, is to invent something, to build something, to bootstrap something that they can stop. And it doesn't matter who they are. It might be the government. It might be all the governments of the world. It might be, pick your attack vector. It's the whole idea of Bitcoin is that it's unstoppable. That's the whole game. And I always have to laugh about every other project that calls itself a quote unquote cryptocurrency, whatever that means. Like if you have like pause buttons and outages and like development teams that can just shut down the network, then what kind of game are you even playing? And so I just use killing all the ants of this world as an analogy. Just try that. And so I hope this kind of makes it obvious that, ants are going to be around. And so, so the Bitcoin network is going to be around as well.
I actually really love the ant analogy, and I feel like that's going to make a fantastic clip to share on social media and hopefully try to explain to people, meme to people, why Bitcoin is such an anti-fragile beast.
It's even worse than ants, like it's, if you kill a couple of ants on one part of the planet, they will become more resilient and pop out somewhere else, like that's how Bitcoin works. It's like the Hydra.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So part of your thread is you kind of dive into, obviously Bitcoin is multifaceted, but Bitcoin is also different things to different people. And people they project themselves onto Bitcoin. Can you talk a little bit about that concept and how it applies to, individuals and how they may interpret Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is so prismatic in nature. There's just no other way to project your worldview and your experiences on it. And I'm guilty of that as well. Like I came from a computer science background as a programmer, and I saw it as just a technical toy at first. Like I had no idea about money or the history of money or economics or anything like that. And I wasn't trading at all. So there are some people that come in that are purely trading and they see it as an asset to be traded, and that's all they do and that's all they see. And I really love this phrase that Bitcoin is different things to different people, because it's so obviously true. And you have the financial planners of this world that see it as like a hedge to whatever inflation, or you also have the cypherpunks that see it very differently. You have the Austrian economists that see it very differently. You also have people that really need to use Bitcoin either to protect themselves from inflation or also from seizure of assets. And you also have like sex workers and other marginalized groups that might not have great access to financial instruments, and they might be forced to use it as well. You also have some jurisdictions that outlaw certain kinds of drugs and medication, and they might have to use it as well to get what they need to get. And there are all kinds of different people, like how you see it, how you can see it and understand it. And I think we kind of see that it evolve over time as well. Like as Bitcoin evolves and our understanding of it evolves, all of those kind of ways how you can view Bitcoin and also how Bitcoin appeals to you and the different groups of people that it might appeal to will change. And we see that now. Like Bitcoin is now very appealing, for example, to companies and CEOs as just reserve asset to put it on your balance sheet, on your balance sheet. And we didn't see that like 5 years ago, and just, you could argue that Bitcoin wasn't ready yet and it was too small and too volatile and so on and so forth. I think it still will be insanely volatile, but it now has a proven track record, and some people understand it well enough as a savings technology and understand like the 21 million limit and everything that relates to that well enough that they are saying, I'm moving away from the dollar, I'm moving away from the euro, and my base money, so to speak, for my company or for myself is going to be Bitcoin. And I really love how this is evolving and how kind of slowly, but on the other hand, very quickly is happening, that we have people now that are living on the Bitcoin standard. And we had that for a while. I mean, there are some individuals that live on the Bitcoin standard, but now we have companies moving towards a Bitcoin standard. And I think this will evolve as well. And we will have even bigger entities moving towards a Bitcoin standard.
Yeah, I mean, you talking about kind of like this snowballing effect in Bitcoin growing to meet new needs, it kind of makes me think of a really fantastic article that Dinesh Saat posted on Bitcoin Magazine. You can follow him on Twitter at Dinesh MSAAT. But the article is titled, "In Trading Hours, Bitcoin is a Mature Asset." And what Dinesh did was he calculated how many trading hours Bitcoin had been trading and then compared it to how many hours the S&P 500 had been trading, the Dow Jones Industrial Average had been trading, and several other like key financial instruments. And in trading hours terms, Bitcoin has been traded more than almost every asset on the Dow Jones Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ. The S&P 500, Bitcoin will overtake it next summer, and Dow Jones probably in the next 3.5 years. So it has twice as many, a little bit bigger of a lead. But ultimately, Bitcoin, because it's permissionless, because it's growing exponentially and it's compounding on itself, like it's kind of ballooning into something that's much bigger than people are expecting it to be. And that's just one example of how it's doing it on, existing assets. I feel like that kind of like plays into this idea of, Bitcoin is just growing into this something that can be relied on by more and more people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like we haven't even seen the start of it yet. Like all of that is true, but also I think it kind of hasn't even started yet. I mean, it's not outrageous to think that in a couple of years, maybe even like next year or in 2 years from now, we will have like high frequency trading on Lightning, for example. And then everything that has to do with trading volumes, it will just explode. And the way I like to think about it is my favorite comparison to make sense of what is happening is like just look back and look at how the internet developed and just the outrageous amounts of information that are stored and transported on the internet. Like, I think everyone kind of knows those statistics that, I don't know, like a gazillion hours of video content is uploaded like every minute to the internet. And there's just like, I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but it's all of it is ridiculous, and the amount of petabytes that are stored, and you just can't make sense of these numbers. And if you would have talked about these numbers like 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that we will have so much information in this global communications network that like not even all of the lifetimes combined would be enough to just watch all the video content on 2x, for example. And it's ridiculous, it's really ridiculous. And I think it will be equally ridiculous, even more so in Bitcoin, that the party hasn't even started yet. Like I really like the analysis of Croesus BTC on Twitter, who talks about where we are in terms of just a regular technology adoption curve. And we are still in the early, like we're not even in the early adopters phase yet, pretty much. Like we're, I think, hovering around like 1% of people that interacted with Bitcoin in any way, like worldwide. And like the early adopters started with like 2.5% or something. I might have these numbers wrong, but if you imagine just the big S curve, we're still at the very, very bottom of the S curve. So the big knee hasn't even started yet. And I can't tell you when it's going to start, but I think just nothing will make sense anymore. Everything's going to be really wild, and everything has the potential to happen very, very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, moving from 10,000 to 16,000 felt like it happened quickly. And I have a feeling like that is not even the beginning of what, quote unquote, the S curve looks like.
Yeah, exactly. I think, the way I think about it is I feel like the whole macro environment is so ridiculously stupid, and just it's hard to think of a better hyper-Bitcoinization scenario. But it of course depends on your viewpoint, what's good and whatnot. But I think we're going to see fiat currencies failing left and right, and so pricing Bitcoin in fiat currencies just won't make sense anymore. Like we'll have ridiculous prices, just like they had in Weimar Germany. Like like a stake is like 2 billion Weimar dollars, whatever. Like Deutsche Reichsmark, and so I think it's going to be stupid, all of it. And I don't think it necessarily is going to happen all at once, because it will happen hopefully kind of slowly, and hopefully like country by country and so on and so forth. But still, I have the feeling that it has the potential to happen really quickly, because the world is so interconnected. And you also, as we've seen in 2020, like a lot of crazy shit can happen. And just with the coronavirus, for example, like if you had told anyone 2 months before the global lockdown that everything will be locked down, most people would have laughed you out of the room. And I think similar things can happen, that just people switch to Bitcoin. And of course, I think Bitcoin currently isn't ready, but who knows what kind of improvements come along, and suddenly it is ready. And I just would like to remind of everyone of the fact that, a couple of years ago, TikTok didn't exist. And then it took them 6 months to get a ridiculous amount of users, like 1 billion users in a couple of months. And I just want to point out that in today's day and age, downloading a new app and just adopting a kind of new payment system, like a new PayPal or Venmo or whatever have you, and it uses Bitcoin in the background, it can happen really quickly. And I think we will have a couple of these moments, and I termed in the voice over IP moment for Bitcoin. And this happened on the internet as well. Like at one point in time, all the telephone networks, they switched to internet telephony, like voice over IP. And as an end user, you don't necessarily notice it, but it's a big change. And I see, and it also happened on TV, for example. If we made the switch from analog to digital, and but as an end user, you probably don't even notice. Like you get a new box and the picture is clearer and whatever. If you lose signal, you lose it completely. That's the changes that you notice. But we can have the same on the financial infrastructure, for example. Again, I don't think Bitcoin is ready yet, but maybe it will be in 5 years, and maybe it can happen all at once then. Because if you, as a bank, have a competitive advantage to settle everything in Bitcoin, for example, or if you're a payment provider or what have you, if you're a new kind of bank, then all of it can happen really quickly. But again, it's really hard to say.
It is really hard to say. And I mean, we could talk for hours about, what it will look like. I know that Stacy Herbert and Max Kaiser have a great podcast, the Orange Pill podcast, which kind of dreams about what hyper Bitcoinization will look like. And the CEO of Bitcoin Magazine, David Bailey, he's quoted saying that it doesn't begin until hyper Bitcoinization. The true prosperity that Bitcoin and a sound money system will provide doesn't begin until Bitcoin is the standard. So, I mean, I guess before we end it, Gigi, do you have any last words on, Bitcoin adoption from the perspective of circularity? And yeah, I guess we can just kind of close it out from there.
Yeah, I think the sentiment is true that it doesn't really begin once we hit hyper-Bitcoinization, and it's really hard to define hyper-Bitcoinization precisely. Like, again, it's also very hard to define when the internet won and when the internet took over. It obviously won. Like, if you want to do anything meaningful in terms of communication or putting out content or something, if you're not doing it on the internet, what are you even doing? And I think it will be very similar, but you can't really pinpoint where the internet took over and when other mediums died. So I think it will be similar for Bitcoin. And I think it will just be, in terms of circularity, there's obviously a circular Bitcoin economy already. There are people earning Bitcoin. There are people out of necessity spending Bitcoin because 100% of the income stream is in Bitcoin. So you have to spend it to just pay rent and buy food. And I think the amount of people that are living like that and just opting out of their fiat system will grow. And I agree that the real fun starts once we have a critical mass of those people and companies, and also, yeah, probably nation states in the future, but who knows how long this will take. And yeah, I think it will be just very interesting changes, because remember, there's no way the only way to get Bitcoin is to acquire it from someone else. Like, you pretty much cannot steal Bitcoin. You have to provide something of value, and someone else has to willingly part with their Bitcoin. And I think the profundity of that cannot be overstated. Like, there is no other way to extract value from the global markets than to be productive. And I think this is an enormous change for society. And I think, like the circular economy that Bitcoin gravitates towards, it will be a bright orange future, to quote another meme.
Amazing. Well, you guys, you can find Gigi at Dergigi. You can find me at CK_snarks. And of course, you can find all this content at Bitcoin Magazine. Gigi, thanks again for coming on. Thanks for breaking down these complex ideas. I think there's amazing explanations in here, and I can't wait to dissect it and break it down and share these memes with the world.
Thanks for having me, CK.
A quick reminder that all of the content in this episode is for informational and entertainment purposes only. You should not construe the information as legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. Nothing contained in this presentation constitutes a solicitation, recommendation, or offer by BTC Media, the Let's Talk Bitcoin podcast network, or any third-party service provider to buy or sell securities or any other financial instruments. Do your own research.